So I realized something lately, and it's the importance of perspective. So the way that we view things, I think God highlighting the importance of perspective in my life has changed my perspective in life. So I'm going to talk about that a bit today. But first I'm going to read a psalm, Psalm 61. I'm going to read from verse 1 to 3, and then I'm going to talk about it. So in the psalm, David says, "Hear my cry, O God, listen to my prayer. From the end of the earth I call to you when my heart is faint. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I, for you have been my refuge, a strong tower against the enemy." I have a question, and the question is, when you are faced with a difficult time in your life, difficult season of your life, because we all have them, maybe you're going through a difficult season right now, maybe you've been through one. Either way, we know it's inevitable as a Christian, especially. It's going to happen. We're all going to have difficult times in our life. We're going to face difficult things. The question is, how are we going to approach those difficulties, and how are we going to perceive them? When a difficult situation comes in our life, are we standing on the ground looking up at this difficulty, this problem, as if it's like a big mountain that seems like impossible to climb? Or are we standing on top of that mountain after we've climbed it and looking down at the world below us, looking down at our problems and seeing how small it actually is, and seeing how small the world is from such a high perspective? David says, "Lead me to the rock that is higher than I." It made me think that when we are faced with difficult situations, difficult times, the first person we should go to is Jesus, right? Because he is our rock who we can stand upon. And he's always the one who's going to be there to strengthen us and give us the power to keep going forward and moving forward. Think about the significance and importance of mountains in the Bible. Like, Jesus went up to the mountain to commune with God, and he also got transfigured on top of a mountain. God spoke to Abraham on top of a mountain, and Moses met God on top of a mountain. The list goes on and on. Basically, mountains are very significant in the Bible. And you ever think about why? I've never climbed a mountain, but I can imagine that when you finally reach the top of that mountain and you're looking down at the world and the amazing view, how rewarding that would be, and how just an amazing feeling that would be, right? Because you're like standing on top of the world. God has called us to be victorious over these things that are pulling us down in the world and against the enemy. He's given us the power against the enemy who is always trying to come against us and keep us down on the ground, right? And so when difficulties come our way, we need to run to Jesus first and foremost and get our strength from him. Stand on top of the world, so to say, and against the enemy. Stand against the enemy, because God has given us that victory against him, and we just need to remember it and stand upon it, stand upon our identity in Christ, change our perspective, the way that we are viewing things. I know that when I'm viewing things so negatively, I'm really giving the enemy exactly what he wants. The enemy wants us to stay in such a negative state of mind, where we're just so, everything that comes our way is like a defeat, and we feel like we can't get up and we can't keep going, and that's the lie. And we need to really identify it as a lie and cast it away and give it to the Lord, really. I think standing on top of a mountain, looking out at the world, looking down at the world, it's almost like seeing things from God's perspective. That doesn't mean that God sees the problems that we're facing in our life as something small or irrelevant, I think God really cares about every single one of us and everything that we are going through. But when we look through his eyes, we would see that nothing is impossible for him. That's his perspective. He can do anything and all things, and nothing is impossible for him. As it says, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. And so it's time for us to start believing that, right? Also in the Bible, when God is talking to his people, he asks them a lot of questions. And sometimes I wondered, well, why would God ask them something like, for example, with Adam and Eve, when they were hiding from him after they had sinned and eaten the forbidden fruit. God had asked them, where are you, and who told you that you are naked, right? He asked Elijah, when Elijah was hiding out in the cave, he asked him, what are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? And so God asked them these questions that obviously he is all-knowing, he already knows these answers, but these questions weren't for him, these questions were for them to think about what they were doing. And so maybe God is asking you something today, and it's a question that's supposed to shift your perspective. He wants you to see things differently. He wants you to start seeing things from his point of view, from his eyes. And I think when that happens, you're going to see a huge change in your life for the better. God has a plan for all of us. He has plans to give us a future, a hope and a future. And I know in difficulties, it's really hard sometimes to change our perspective. Like, I'm speaking from my own experience. I know that it's hard when you're going through depression or anxiety. It can be very difficult to get out of that, but there is hope, and it's always possible to get out of it with God. It's the only way to get out of it is with God. And through your difficulties, he is with you. That's what I think is so important for us to remember, is that God is always with us, and he will not leave us. He will be faithful to be with us until we are out of this difficult season. If you're going through a tough time, just go to Jesus and keep your focus on him. You don't have to go to anything else to try to get temporary satisfaction or pleasure from. Just go to Jesus, because he's the one who will give you what you're looking for, what you're searching for, what you need. David knew this. David knew that God was his refuge and his strength in times of trouble, and it's time for us to remember that as well. David had enemies who were trying to end his life and destroy him, and we also have an enemy who is trying to destroy us, destroy our faith. Just as it says in John 10:10, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But remember that we have authority and victory over the enemy. He is the defeated enemy, and it's time for us to take back what he's trying to steal from us. For whoever is watching this, I know that you are going to get through this, whatever you're facing, because God is way bigger than your problems. And focus on how big your God is, how big our God is, because he is going to fight for you, and you're going to be victorious over what you're going through. And Jesus is coming soon, and we have all of eternity and heaven and no more suffering, pain and suffering to look forward to. So be encouraged. God bless you, and see you next time. Bye bye.